And we are live. Hello everyone. Welcome to Blender Today 56. Yes. Blender Today, for those that just don't know, because we just moved to a new channel. This is the Blender channel. This is a show, a weekly show where we see all the updates, whatever has changed in the Blender universe, especially on the Blender software itself, in the app, some community updates, but mainly focusing on what's new because Blender is growing so fast, especially 2.8, getting new features every week. So more than a year ago, I decided to start making these weekly updates, and they became pretty. A lot of people are following it, so it's a good way to keep updated. So some people are already here for a while, so this is how it works. Basically, I just at this moment, I just asked them, "Hey, give me a thumbs up if the sound is okay," because I managed to fail every time. Not now. Blender Today, just a brief introduction, is actually a community. It's a website. .today is a domain. So you can do Blender.Today and it's going to redirect you to this community website where people can post news or artwork or questions or kinds of things. And in this post that I have here, it's where you're going to ask your questions. The website is going to go down, so hurry up. The questions, though, usually I used to follow them on up here on the YouTube comments, but I think it's gonna get a bit crowded, so go post here. If you see that your question has been already asked, please give it a little heart icon here, so they're gonna be all the way to the top, and I managed to cover them. So not nervous at all. We're here from the Blender Animation Studio, by the way. So over the course of this series, we're gonna have guests. We're gonna get people over. We're gonna see what we can make it more spicy. For today, I think I'm gonna just be myself. Thank you for all the nice thumbs up. So let's move on to more Blender stuff. Just a quick heads up that in June, just in a couple of months, there is the London Blender Day. It's a community event. So it's not like a Blender official event. The only official one is the Blender conference that takes place in October here in Amsterdam. Then the community, though, they always make their own conferences. There is one in Spain for Blendiveria. There is in Germany's Blender Day. In Brazil, there's also a conference. In Argentina, there is a Blender, Che Blender is called. So Blender events are all over the world. This one in London is coming in June, and I happen to be giving a presentation there about Blender 2.8 and the Spring Open Movie project, which, by the way, has a release date online Thursday. It's gonna be up, so check it out. And yeah, the lineup is amazing. Jama is gonna be there, so nice. And yeah, will be interesting. It's a full day in London, so see you there, whoever is gonna be in there. All right, everything is okay, no fooling. Yeah, it's April Fools. Who likes April Fools jokes? I was gonna start with like, oh yeah, Blender got bought by Adobe and that kind of stuff. Why would you? We can actually spend our time reading the news, checking the Blender updates. But the only issue that I'm doing it at this time is the developers meeting. Every other week it's at 6 p.m. and now it's 5 p.m. So it hasn't happened yet. So I made my own list of updates that I write. I keep like a little list of okay, what I'm gonna talk about. And here's my list. So first, some UI, some interface updates. I just compiled Blender, by the way, and I I'm gonna show you. If you wanna follow along though, you can get Blender from the builder.blender.org, or you can go to blender.org/experimental. It's a redirect, so it's gonna take you to the platform of your choice. From here, you can see the 2.8 beta is the one we are gonna be showing all the updates on. I already had this very glamorous frame from Hero. I was testing some of the new updates. So let's see what's new. There is some news and some changes in the interface. Some of them are more of like nothing crazy, don't worry. But some of them are more like 8, for example, for when you want to see in the interface which button is going to be pressed when you hit enter. In Blender 2.7 and before, a week ago, for example, it wasn't really clear if you open, for example, if you had you were moving something, you are changing your scene, and then you decide to quit, you will have these kind of dialogues that you will see, for example, cancel, discard changes, save and quit. What would happen if you press like enter or return? Not really a good way to know until now. Now there is this pre-selection or pre-highlighted buttons in the UI that you can set. Also, if you're making your own add-ons and you have these kind of dialogues, you can set it to what's going to be the default active setting. You can check in the API. There is a you can see the changes actually on the wiki page. So check it out. I think you can go to the wiki from within Blender. So if you don't know the shortcuts by heart, why would you not do it? You can go here from the manual Blender website. We should add the wiki here. Okay, that is a feature request. I think we should add it. It has all kinds of information, especially here, all the API changes that are constantly happen for people making add-ons. This is like super important. So check it out. By the way, also there is a speaking of the API changes, there is one training on Blender Cloud that is called, it's a course. It's a the scripting for artists. Last week, Sivren added a Blender 2.80 page. This one is available for everyone. You don't have to have a Blender Cloud subscription. You can just see it. But it's a very nice page where he sums up all the little things to keep in mind when you are working, when you're upgrading your add-ons. For example, selecting and hiding. How does it work in Blender 2.8 compared to 2.7? So there's a whole lot of links here that you can check, and this page is going to be kept up to date by Sivren, which made this training. If you haven't seen it, it's very nice, but it's under a Blender Cloud subscription, so keeping that in mind. Let's continue. Everything okay? Turn up your volume. Should I turn up my volume? Should I speak louder? I think it's okay. I have the little the drawing is just like the little animation goes all the way to the top. So I just need to enforce my teenage voice a bit more. Let's move on to Blender. So that was for the highlighted, the active default. It's also available, for example, if you have like open, you will see now that this gets highlighted and pretty much everywhere where it's supposed to be pre-highlighted. If there are some places where you haven't seen it yet, it's going to be added over time, but that's the main thing. Another UI interface user experience change was that actually using the file browser is that now you can select multiple. For example, if you want to, in this case, for opening doesn't make much sense, but when you want to open or be able to execute some operations on multiple objects, you can now do shift click, just like it would happen in a regular file browser. You can like add to the selection. Thank you, Sunshine. Here's a shout out, and thank you everyone for saying that everything it's okay here. Volume is okay, and the hearts, so much love. Thank you. Moving on, there is a little change. It's a small one, but the interface down here in the status bar where all the messages happen, like when you do something, when you copy an object or when you deleted an object and Blender notifies you, that message used to be very brief. It will flash in one color depending on the kind of message, kind of notification. So if it was like an information, it will be blue, an error will be red, and so on. So now the change was done that the color stays there for a bit longer, so that way you can actually catch it. Still, I think it could be left there a bit even longer. I don't mind. Like even social network notifications stay up much longer, but I think it's a little yet big improvement. Remember that all of the notifications that you have down here, you can see them also in the info editor, so you can see with the same color. And if you want to tweak, if the color down here is not enough for you, you can always change it in the user preferences, because it's actually using the theme settings from the info editor. So if you go to themes and then move to info, then you can change, for example, for info background, you can make it anything you want, red. So very, very clear that it's a dangerous information that you're getting there. But the idea is that you can tweak it with to match your theme. I love Blender. Awesome. Thank you. April Fool's joke? No April Fool's joke. I'm not a big fan of April Fool's jokes, actually. I like how Reddit does it, that they make a game or like an experience for the community to play around, instead of making a joke that everybody knows that is gonna be fake. So another UI interface, user interface tweak is to tell the nodes that are muted, or they're not really active, or they can't be used. So it's like inactive nodes. So for example, to see it, go to any node editor, and until a few days ago, before this setting was implemented, the nodes that had like a red top red header, you wouldn't be able to tell which one was muted, because well, in this case is the material output, but the ones that have red on the top, since the muted color was red, you couldn't really tell. But now enter introducing half active basically nodes. The nodes that are muted, in this case I press M for muting, are going to be very clearly shown that they're not really working. So this keeps it working exactly how it used to be. For example, if you had a color mix, color ramp, and you use a RGB curve, for example, if you connect things, if you are connecting stuff over, so how handy to connect the color RGB and then change it again. But you will see that it becomes dark, and I think it's a good improvement because it highlights the red line in the back a lot better than before. I don't know if you get to see it here, but it's very visible. What is the red line? The red line means that it's going to, what you're going to get as a result. You're going to get this factor all the way here. So you know what you're getting. For example, if you had, and in that node is not very clear, but if you have like a separate that has like 3 outputs, then you connect it. If you mute it, then you want to know what is the result that I'm getting. So I'm getting this one, for example. Very handy. And I think that's it with this kind of updates. There is a bunch of fixes in Eevee, and there's a very nice new feature /fix in Eevee that I'm gonna show you now in a bit. Still getting everything here. I love Autodesk Happy April Fools. I haven't seen that one yet. I haven't checked on all of the April Fools yet. So that's pretty much with the UI. There is the bunch of fixes in the Eevee that are all over the place. For example, Voronoi cells, the Voronoi cell type cells texture, procedural texture in Eevee wasn't working. Now it is. Yay! It wasn't working on some setups. It was AMD and Windows that it wasn't working. Then Eevee texture box mapping. So when you have a texture and you use box mapping, so instead of being flat and stretched, it's like mapped like a box from all sides. That wasn't matching cycles very well, so now it is. So if you had issues with that, that was probably it. Then there was some rendering off screen with Eevee. It wasn't keeping it has some issues with color, so it's color management. Now that should be working as well. And the last one, it was that on Windows, rendering command line with Eevee with a bunch of instances or duplies or particles, it was very slow. Now, not anymore. And I'm running out of voice. Sponsored by the Code Quest 2018. Is there a Code Quest this year? Sort of. Next week, there is the home stretch, by the way. This is kind of a big news. Next week, we're going to have a bunch of developers here. Maybe I could invite one. Let me know which one you think we should invite over to the channel. Or maybe we should actually get Spring. Or maybe we can get both. We just make it half and half. Wow, that could be fine. All right, when will the 2.8 beta version launch? When is ready? Beta is already there, 2.80. But the final release still, you can't plan those things. There is already over 1,200 bugs in the bug tracker. A lot of them are duplicated or they're reported in some other way. So it's not like there is 1,000 bugs. And there are also not all of them high priority, and there's some of them are coming from 2.7. So it's not that 2.8 is worse or has more bugs. Well, it does in some areas because a lot has changed with the dependency graph and you name it. But in 2.7 there was also many bugs in general that are now part of the Blender 2.8. I just got a bit distracted. There's people walking around. There's I'm at the studio, so actually I should get them. It's like, hey, you're interrupting. Come here. Go talk to people. There's the Spring team still upstairs, and there's the developers here on the sides. I have Blender Cloud developers on one side, and Blender developers. Blender developers. All right. Can I buy a rocket ship from Homestretch? You can still buy rockets if they're available here at the Blender Animation Studio. Let's move on to the last feature that I have to talk about today, and then we will start with the questions. So remember, if you want to ask a question, I'll try my best to answer, but you can ask them here on Blender Today. I'm going to share the link on the chat so people can just click on it. All right. Let's move on. The last feature is actually a bug fix, but it's such a nice one that it deserves its moment. Eevee support for object mapping, or like a texture coordinate type object you can take. So you can basically map a texture based on another object. Well, isn't that amazing? It wasn't working on Eevee yet, and now it is. So that was kind of I couldn't paste the link. Maybe I'm being banned from my own channel. That's interesting. Okay, so let's move to the questions actually, because the mapping for the object is something that was working there, and I think it's better if I spend time because the questions are going up. There's 27 questions, so let's move on. First question. So, what date release assets management? Can you talk about the assets management? So, the Blender Code Quest last year, it was like the gathering of developers here at the studio to talk about to see how to move Blender 2.8 forward, and it worked. It basically took all the projects that were like dangling around Eevee, got more of like a focus on getting the real-time part right and getting more of like the features for the workbench. For example, before the Code Quest last year, there was no workbench engine, basically like the viewport. It wasn't there. It was either Eevee or Cycles. So now there, for example, that was one of the things that came out of it. The other projects that were around was overrides. So basically dynamic overrides and static overrides. What does it mean? A static override is when you, for example, when you load a character and you can make a proxy of it, and then you have it. So that's still working in 2.8, but there was the ambition of having dynamic override. So something that you can override and keep changing it dynamically, automatically, basically. That is not yet part of Blender 2.8, and that was one of the targets, though, that was like ideally would have been implemented. Although the work for it is really, really far, so I would hope it will be part of the next release, 281, 282. The asset manager, just to answer your question, is one of those projects where we was probably trying to how do you call it, like a bite more than you can eat, or basically or chew more. Basically you are trying to do too many things at the same time. Blender 2.8 already had changes for like the tool system, the key map, the outliner changes, the dependency graph, Eevee/workbench. So many projects that the asset manager didn't find its place, but it's high. I would say even like on the top of the priority list for the future. The development of it, like the actual engine, it's there. If you there is a branch of Blender that is called Asset Engine. Now it's pretty outdated, I guess. Like if you compile it, it's gonna look like 2.7 or very early 2.8. But the code is there, like the engine. That there are even demos where you can connect Blender and Asset Manager locally. You can have your own like assets. You can mark them. You can add a list. You can even connect to an Asset Manager online on the cloud, like on Blender Cloud is the example. So it is working. The code is there. There's also mockups. So everything is is there for ready to be taken over. But the priority right now for 2.80, the first release of 2.8, is to make it stable, right? If it's stable, if it's unstable, then there is no asset manager that is going to make it better. Actually, it's going to be worse. Next question by Dodo Dorian. Hello, Pablo. I love this. I'm going to give it a heart so that, oh, I don't have permission. I'm not logged in. Oops. Okay, let's, is everything okay? I'm going to log in, and in the meantime I'm gonna ask on some questions. Oh, I already logged in. So 2.8 UI becomes awesome. Yay. I love Blender. I love from India, from everywhere. Are you watching this from, by the way? Let's continue. Okay, 34 comments. I need to hurry up. Hello, Pablo. I love the show. Let's hope we don't get a cringy April Fool's this year. I didn't. You see, I didn't. 2 UI related questions with GIF. How advanced? Will the active tool header ever be enhanced? Some menus are hidden sometimes, confusing, or not natural to find them. Why not moving them on top of the editors, like this? So, moving the top bar to the top of the editor. I think that it's even making it worse in a way, because it's just adding another layer. It's like having a dual header. And what happens when you have many more options? So I think one way of fixing, actually, well, to answer your question, yes, the active tool header will be enhanced. Is at the moment one of the issues, and it's so cringy when I see like advanced users, even like people from here from the studio, that they're just sharing a screen, for example, and they have like this awesome, amazing render, and then they have like this, like a whole empty row up here or here. And yeah, it needs improvement. That is one of the topics that we're going to tackle next week during the home stretch. The home stretch is like the final line of the 2.80 project. Last year, 1 year ago, we got together, all the developers and artists and designers got together here to define and get Blender forward. This year, the idea is to wrap the 2.80 project and see how to tackle the next coming months of fixes and just basically getting 2.80 to a usable state. It is pretty useful. I mean, usable. We kind of made a short film with it already. So the toolbar that here this is called the toolbar. The top bar is a toolbar. The top bar is one of the topics that's gonna get tackled. For the time being, though, you can access those settings here on the sidebar. So I wonder, just thinking, this was today, just thinking about it. Like, what if, because some of the settings they're cool to have, especially if you're on Sculpt, for example. If you're in one of these modes where you can paint, you can draw. Instead of having it down here in the properties, maybe it would be cool to have it here on the sidebar, like as a tab. For example, all add-ons now have their settings here, unless they have tools. Add-ons can now, since last week, I talked about it in the last week in the previous episode. You can search on here on YouTube, but you can now register, add-ons can register their own tools here on the sidebar. So it's pretty handy. And well, the panels, they will go here to the properties. So I wonder if for the tool properties, why not maybe having here on a tab? And then that way you can work full screen, which is the most efficient way of working. So I don't know, I'm just talking out loud here. For Grace Pencil, though, for example, for 2D animation, it's awesome to have the settings app here. So I think we just need to hide it from like when it's not super useful at the moment. There are many cases, for example, when you render, it still shows up. That's not very handy. When you open a file, it still shows up. Then it should be hidden. So there is we have to go to all the use cases and try to hide it. But I think adding it to each editor maybe could work, but still limited space. It will solve the issue, though, that now we have that the active tool here, it's not per, the active tool is per editor. So if you're, for example, like you're editing and you change the active tool, then the toolbar, the top bar, changes. So and it didn't even remember where I was on. So if you have here, for example, another editor, the 3D view, and you change it, then it will keep moving from one to the other. We need to talk about this. So why floating windows have never been a thing in Blender? Well, because of the non-blocking UI, the interface, which other softwares are even copying or adopting. Because a simple pin button on the main header will do the job right. Max and Maya users will really appreciate it when they decide to jump on Blender 2.8. Look how well it will work. Is that what you... I'm not a big fan of floating windows. There is a reason why we should maybe temporarily floating, yes, but a whole floating window, it's, I don't know. I don't see myself using it. Maybe it would be good to support it for some people, but for example, my window manager allows it. I can right click and do always on top, and basically it keeps the window on top. So I can go to, for example, the compositor and keep it there, and then when I move around, it stays there. But I've never found the need for using this feature, actually, even though I can already using it because I'm using this window manager. It's called GNOME on Linux. But yeah, that I'm not sure. It kind of breaks the Blender philosophy. I'm gonna give it a hearts so I can continue reading. When is Blender going to announce that it was bought by Adobe? I already did. When will the quit menu come to Windows and Mac? There is no date, but there is a development done on that regard. What he's asking, though, is the menu that appears when you're closing Blender. The quit dialog is now renamed to save dialog. So it shouldn't be too long until this gets implemented, but there are other priorities at the moment. There is a patch, though. It's there is work in progress, but it's not implemented yet. The issue is that this dialog has to be per per operating system, because Windows places the buttons on one side, for example, and Mac on the other side. Linux is just it does whatever. So Linux is actually using Blender's built-in, and then we'll have to add exceptions for either if you're using Windows or Mac. Next question. Well, will the plasticity cloth improvements be implemented? I see other features mentioned over are committed, but the plasticity is missing. That's a very good question. I haven't actually heard about from this developer, but this is a feature, the plasticity, how plastic it is. Oh, yeah. I haven't heard actually. We could ask the developer, or the developer that worked on is Luca Rod. So maybe we can ask. Are you even watching this stuff? Okay, next question. Daniela Palme asks, "Hey Pablo, quick question. Do you remember Alt-C? It brought up the convert object menu. Now we don't have that anymore. But we can always add the hotkeys to favorites easily. The thing is, I don't like having to convert to mesh and convert to curve being two different hotkeys. Is there any way to get the menu convert as hotkey again?" It should be possible. So for example, if I have a for example, text, and then Alt-C is a convert, should be a convert to. Here, this is the menu. So you can right click. Hey, that's illegal. The convert to menu is not even available. So let's see in Python. Let's dig into the code. Interface, enable Python tooltips. I have them, and developers extra. But even then, it's not showing up. Not even a tooltip. This is showing. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I will. This could be reported as a bug. I mean, because it's really all the settings here are available except the one menu and the set origin either. Maybe it's actually part of the code that is made for this space, like for this editor. So it's built on the fly. It's not actually a built-in function. Good catch. Should look into it. Thank you. I will give it a heart. So I know that I answered them. When will the 2.8 be out of beta? Well, when it's ready, when it's closer to, like after beta, there is just release candidate. The release candidate is basically the first, almost final version, the one that it's almost there, just with the final jump needed to be done. So it's mainly for people to test, to see everything it's there and it's working. All the feature, it should be feature complete, no major changes since by then, just fixes and fixes and fixes. So one, I would say give it a few months. A few, not so many, few. What is the official value for few? Is everything okay? Yes. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Real-time physics mode update. Something, no updates yet in that regard, unfortunately. But the branch with the everything nodes is actually moving pretty fast. So maybe I should get the developer, which is actually sitting next door at some point. Next question by Tapan Sharma. Hi, how to select a line of vertices or edges or faces in the UV editor? I'm still simulating 3 mouse button. If I'm still simulating the 3 mouse button, it should just work like in 2.7. There is no well, there is the left click select. What are you using? Left click, right click, because that will affect it. But it should work as in 2.7. So if it doesn't, go please to help and then report a bug. This is gonna open the browser with already pre-filled all the information about the graphics card that you have, the operating system, and all the basic stuff. Let's move on. No personal info, just the hardware that you're using, the graphics card and the operating system. So, are the shortcuts going to keep changing, or are they pretty much decided until the official release? They are pretty much decided. If there is something that changes, it will probably be to fix things. For example, in the left click key map. So when you start Blender by default, now it's using left click. So that will be basically fixes or improvements. Mac still doesn't have 3 mouse buttons. The official one, no. I think the magic mouse is 2 mouse button. Game engine will be back? No, unfortunately not. But there's amazing Blender game engines out there. There is Godot, for example, that is going pretty well, and it works really well with Blender, and it's open source. Let's move on. Colette Levy asks, hey, as someone who makes renders for Amazon, completely white backgrounds are required. Are there plans to add a node that ignores color management in the compositor to make the background completely white without affecting the rest of the scene? Setting the value of the background to be a high number to get white background makes the rest of the... Yeah, no, that is like a hacking if you're using it that way. The way to do it, I would render just with alpha and then compose it non-using color management. Because a node that ignores color management, that's illegal. No, it's not illegal. It's just hard to picture, right? Because it's applied to the image itself. So you can't just select a few objects and not apply it. What you can do probably, yeah, is just use a compositor, render with alpha, and then use a scene, because the color management settings are per scene. So just as an example, for example, I have with color. This is my basic scene. I have, for example, here in the render settings, I have color management, and I have it to, I didn't compile with I'm not using the official default. I'm compiling my own, and I compile without the library that adds Filmic. But imagine there is Filmic here. That's what happened when you mess with the code. If you get it from Blender.org, you're gonna get it fine. It's just like I'm compiled a bit limited to compile faster sometimes. But basically what I mean is that you can basically have a new scene that it has this one disabled, for example, the color management disabled, or another kind of color management, and you can use the compositor to mix the images, both of them. So that way you can have a bit of both. Godot is the Blender of game engines. Interesting, yeah. It is. It feels like it. I think it really feels like it. It's like a project that has been worked on for many years, decades, and it's suddenly getting a bunch of people interested in it with a big change, and it's going super fast actually with the development. Let's move on. What might come after the 2.8, 2.80? We should start calling it 2.80 because the next one is 281. Is there any plans to attack little features that community ask? And I mean the most popular ones that are repeatedly mentioned and got the highest votes. What he means by votes is the right-click select community, which has the option to sort by top, or like by rating. Basically is a community where people can propose features for Blender. One of those proposals have they can be voted up or down, and this is the kind of community input that is very important, because, for example, this was added almost a year ago and has like a second on the top list, and it's just a bunch of more noise type nodes, which is maybe not a week of work for a developer and can really improve the quality of life. So some of them they're a bit more complicated. Some of them are even done, and the implementation is done. So having a website like this is really, really helpful. And what might come after 2.8? It comes 2.81. 81 is supposed to be also about stabilizing. It's going to be a lot of bug fixes with 2.80 that they just escape the testing period. So I bet it's going to have a lot of fixes in that area. It's also going to, I hope it's going to focus also on the asset manager as a big feature. Maybe UDIM support, I bet might make it there, because there are features that are almost there, like fracture modifiers, also like almost there. So I bet that release might be a good time for it. And the features, the little features, they're being added one by one. Some of them are by like Google Summit of Code. Some of them are by the community just making small patches. So I bet this might be a good moment. It's hard to predict because 2.80 is gonna open it's gonna bring a lot of new developers in. I bet we have new patches in the Blender developer website from people that I've never heard about ever, or just I see on the live stream, and then they put little they make little patches that change one bit of code and then another bit of code. So I hope that having a website like this, where people can see what are the features more asked, there can be implemented by the developers. I think that the core developers are more better. Their time is better spent on fixing Blender, because for fixes you really have to know the code. You have to have worked with Blender for decades, to know where all the areas that it touches. And for small features, then you just need like, for example, adding the more noise types. I don't think this is a huge it doesn't look like, I'm not a developer, sorry, but it doesn't look like something that might break the rest of Blender if it gets added in a nice way. Paul McMahon, say, Pablo, any idea if the particle info node will ever work in Eevee? Well, the object info node is now working. The random setting was working since a couple of weeks ago, so I would say it's a matter of time. But remember, particles in general in Blender, they need to be not ripped apart and like put into a ditch, but almost. And then we need a new particle system. But I would expect it to work, because the idea is that Blender, like Eevee, sort of matches Blender internal, and it worked in Blender internal. So yes. Can texture baking be done in Eevee? And actually, this is answers the same. What I just said answers this same question about baking. It cannot be done currently in Eevee, and if there is like a good argument for it, and I think argument is speed, and also that Blender internal had it, so I think it would be a good thing to do. But it's very tricky, right? Because you have to change the mapping of everything. I wonder if that how could it even work? Next week, we're going to get developers, so maybe you can ask them. Maybe I can get like the top questions. People ask about parallax mapping in Eevee, or like texture baking, or like micro displacement, for example. Maybe you can just grab all those questions and go and ask the developers about it. I bet they're all going to say is, it would be great to have them, but after everything gets fixed and it's more stable, and Eevee works in more graphics cards and not only on a bunch, and that kind of answers that we already know. RTX implementation, not at the moment. Pablo, your mic shakes and knocking. Please tell when the mirror modeling is in edit mode is back. That should be back already. Then RTX implementation is not implemented yet. You can though use CUDA with RTX graphic cards. I was using it because of the when I was using Spring, so it's pretty cool to be able to render with the GPU over 24 gigs of video RAM. Insane. Let's continue. That Drago says, I love the show and I love Blender. Thank you. I do miss the old gizmo and render animation and render image buttons. Can we get that back? What don't make the game engine standalone program? And will they remove doubles be moved to the delete menu? Okay, that's a bunch of questions. The remove double, that's a great idea. Actually, that was proposed last week. I didn't have time to get into it. I can't wait until Spring Open Movie is finally released on Thursday, so we can focus more on these kind of issues. Next week is the keep reminding about these small fixes and changes in Blender, because next week we're gonna have the developers, the home stretch here. So it's gonna be full on Blender development the whole week, and some developers are staying for 2 weeks, so there will be time for doing these kind of little fixes. The render animation, the render image button is something we're gonna talk about during the home stretch as well. So because a lot of people are asking for it, but we have to see how to implement it without it looking weird, without it being the exception. And the old gizmo, I also miss it a lot. I'm gonna be the one pushing to see if that can be brought back, but it will be a pity to not do it. The animators here also are pushing for it to be back, because sometimes you don't need a whole tool for just moving and grabbing and translating, right? You should be able to toggle that gizmo on and off regardless of the tool you're in. So yeah. And why not make the game engine a standalone program? So then we have 2 programs to fix and deploy and release a new version. And that I don't think that's the best idea. Sometimes, some time ago, it was also proposed to, hey, why don't splitting the video editor into its own software? And it's like, no, I don't think so. And that's just personal opinion, but I think it would be a bad decision to take, because it would take away from all the bug fixes that happen in the rest of Blender, also the bug introductions that happen in the rest of Blender. But I don't think so. I think it's better to keep it all in one, so that way it can benefit and it's easier to find the code. And if you compile Blender, you compile everything, so it keeps, the momentum going. Gassem asks, hi Pablo, do you have any plans and tools to add tools for VFX inside Blender, like muscle system, terrain, or crowd? There are no immediate plans as far as I know, but the muscle system will be interesting. Crowd, there are some add-ons for it, and terrain, there's also add-ons at the moment for it, but no plans, as far as I know, for implementing it inside of Blender, like built in. Then how can re-edit the composite after finishing the render? Shift R, it will reload all your images, all your buffer. So Shift R or Control R? Shift R, I think. Try it. Next question, is there a roadmap available for Eevee? No, but there should be one. I think it's important. Maybe that's a good idea for a code blog entry. So like, what is the future of Eevee? What people can expect? What is something that it will be done like for reals, or something that doesn't fit with the rest of Eevee? Because there are things like, I don't know, fish eye in Eevee. That's gonna come eventually. It's just not right now because there are other priorities, but that's gonna come. And the same for all the little things that are missing, parallax mapping. Yeah, that should come eventually. It doesn't break any rule. It's just that there are other priorities at the time, for the time being. Next question: how to combine Eevee with Cycles ray trace shadows? Use scenes. Just render with different scenes, because the render engine is per scene, because we don't have overrides yet. But eventually, when we have, that will be awesome, because then we could override things like that per view layer instead. Yeah, render scenes and use the compositor. Alexander asks, I noticed the background images have gone, so I have to use images plain. Is there a better way, or will background images come back? Background images are not going to come back the way they were in 2.7. The current way is by basically, if you do Shift A, image, and then you can have reference or background image. Background is similar to what used to be there before. If you load the background image, I'm gonna have, for example, the depending on how you are in the scene. For example, I'm now in perspective mode, so I see the plane in perspective, but if I go to orthographic mode, I shouldn't see it. These settings are going to be changed, by the way. You can change them yourself by clicking on the image icon and then just basically enable, disable orthographic, perspective, and all the other settings there. Some of them are similar to what was in 2.7, some of them are new. In 2.7, for background images, you could not enable them to be seen in perspective. There was only visible in ortho view. Now you can actually disable and do the opposite. Disable in ortho and available in perspective. You can also just drag them. You can scale them with the widgets. So in general, you have a few more features than in 2.7, but the implementation needs some love. I think Blender should ask you when you drag and drop an image in the viewport, which happens now at the moment, like when you drop an image or a video even, when you drop one, it becomes an image in the viewport, but it should ask you like, what kind of image do you want? Like a reference or a background, or the newly implemented, added by default, images as plain. I think this one should be on by default. It's awesome. And basically it adds an entry in the image drop down in the Shift A menu, images as plain. So that way you can load an image and have it on as a plane, as an actual geometry that you can render, because those ones you cannot render, they are empties basically. Continue. Is everything okay? Fraction modifier build now on graphic all. Really? So if you go to graphic all, the community, Blender.Community, and then click on graphic all, there should be a new build or an updated build. Yes, fraction modifier, nice, for Windows. Cool. Now everybody's gonna start downloading and then we're gonna go down. Awesome. Here. Great. All right, let's continue. This is, by the way, do you know Graphical? It's a website that has been around forever and allows anyone to upload builds of Blender. So you can upload the build, you can re-update the build. For example, there's this one for the sculpt mode feature that is the most popular one. It's like 650 downloads. There is also another ones that look like 2.7 and have some features. So cool. All right, let's continue. I have 5 minutes to record my voice. Is Alt-B still a thing? Yes, Alt-B is here to stay. And it's even better in 2.8 because you can draw it and you still have the line around it. Basically, Alt-B, it allows you to sort of see through, like draw a part of your mesh, and then you can see through. It's really nice for architectural visualization or for any kind of visualization. Inspect the body, inspect the here, the insides of a monkey. Next question. Real-time cycles viewport using artificial intelligence will be very cool. Yeah, anything using artificial intelligence. No, not everything, but most things. The more we have, the less we have to think, the better. Sean Becker, is there a way to toggle the move tool always on? No. No, but that would be very, very cool actually. Maybe it should be proposed on right-click select, or maybe it's already there. Hi, this exit dialog window also available on Windows? No, that's what I just mentioned at the beginning. There is a patch, but no, there is work in progress. Blender sculpt features will be merged together. Yes, it will be merged, but not everything, I guess, or everything. If everything it meets the development standards, I guess, because it's easy to add a feature, but it's hard to make it work well with the rest of Blender and be performant, because some features they are not so complicated to add and show off, but then it works well in a monkey. But what if you had a super complex scene or multiple objects, or there's things to work on? That's why the developers are the main developer, Pablo, is working on a separate branch on fixing all these adding all these features and being tested by a amazing community of like artists just testing it and testing and trying in all different environments, right? And use cases. So it will be I bet it will be merged. It should be merged not in 2.80 because we are in feature freeze. Should be almost done 2.80, but 2.81 could see some of these features added, or if not all of them, if they all meet to the same level that developers want, and they the UI changes, for example, they also have to follow the guidelines of Blender itself. Just try to make it fit in here. But I hope they invest time on that, like on making it super nice and the interface super clear. Hi Pablo, quick question. Is there anything similar to ZBrush layers planned for Blender? Maybe something like shape keys for multi-res specifically. I think something like that should be possible, but I would get in touch with, I bet the guys from the sculpt mode, the sculpting community in Blender, they're already working on something for it. I haven't heard of it myself, but maybe we can bring some of the developers and artists that are more involved in this and testing it. Maybe we can get them over because they're upstairs actually. Like Yulen is upstairs. He's working on sculpting, and he sculpted all the characters for Spring. Next question. I was wondering, okay, I'm almost running out of time, so 5 more questions. Let's do 5. Number 5. I was wondering last week, I saw a demo of Unreal Engine 4 with the NVIDIA RTX, and it was quite impressive. My question, will Eevee get something similar at some point? Yes, I bet. To improve the renders with this ray tracing. I hope so. I can't say yes or no, but I bet there is already so much potential in this, and it's actually it's a good testing. I wonder what AMD will do about it. But yes, I bet. I can't say for sure, no developer, but yes. And the news about minimal key map. The minimal key map is in actually. That Blender 2.8, what you have is the minimal key map. Then you will have the that's why it's missing so many shortcuts. And then you will have the industry standard key map. That one is up and coming, but the minimal is actually in Blender. Number 3, how to enter walk navigation. I mean, what's the shortcut? Is shift tilde. Tilde is the little curly symbol in the keyboard. If you have a Spanish keyboard, is the ñ. That's all I know. But yes, let's move on. Number 2, yes. Would it be possible to have back-sided polygons darker color? I know there is an overlay mode for face orientation, but it's annoying and time-consuming to constantly switch the overlay on and check it. So it would work. So for example, when you have a face pointing in, so for example, you have it to the other side, and if you enable the face orientation, so for example, this is pointing in red where the, like in blue one direction and in red the other direction of the faces, the normals. So without it, you can't really tell. So maybe they should be darker, like in 2.7. Maybe that's a feature that should be brought back, because at the moment it's hard to see. However, pro tip, if you want to have it quickly available, you can right click, add to quick favorites, and then you can have it in the Q menu when you press Q. So I do that with everything all the time. When I'm in the shading, for example, and I want to quickly add some of the nodes that I use the most. For example, I use the color ramp a lot, and I use for example, the math a lot too. So I just add them to my quick favorites by right clicking, add to quick favorites, and then I just press Q, and the color ramp, Q, math, and then I have my little collection right there. And I think that's the last question, right? Where's your tie? That's the last question. I did not wear a tie. What I wanted to wear today, I was wearing my oldest project-related Blender t-shirt. I have some older Blender t-shirts, but this is my oldest one. It's from Yo Frankie, the open game, the one and only open game project that was 11 years ago. It was produced 11 years ago at the Blender Animation Studio, Blender Institute back then in the other location, but here in Amsterdam. And that is the first project that brought me to Amsterdam. So it's very special, very close to my heart. So I wanted to start this new era of BlenderToday here at the Blender Animation Studio with my oldest precious item with me. So okay, let's get going. I'm not gonna live with I usually live with the special music, but today I think I'm gonna do an exception because it's the first day and gonna confuse a lot of people. Let's first get to know each other. Let's keep doing it. This is going to be happening every week at the same. It's not an April Fool's, at the same channel here on the Blender channel, and at the same time. So next week for European, now with the daylight saving, is at 5 o'clock, or UTC, Universal Time, is at 3 p.m. in 3 in the afternoon. So you should do the math there. What is the time that hits you, whatever you are in the globe? Let me know how did it go, and I so happy to see you over here, by the way. I will see you again. Let me know how this goes, and who wants to see, who do you want to have as a guest next week here with me? Maybe many guests. Look at all this room for activities everywhere. All right. That is all for this week. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next week. Same place, same time. Ciao.